Something strange happens in a country when an entire political party disappears for 8 weeks during a government shutdown, and the only people left in the capital are the ones scrambling to keep the lights on. It wasn't a rumor, it wasn't an exaggeration, and it wasn't political theater. It was real. For 2 straight months, whole rows of seats were empty, hallways were quiet, offices were dark, and the people elected to fight for struggling Americans were nowhere to be found. While the country braced for missed paychecks, rising bills, and a government on the verge of collapse, the individuals who were supposed to stop it simply vanished.
Stayed in Washington to try to end this shutdown. But here's the deal. Most Americans think that what Republicans did, skipping town in a shutdown, has been one of the most disgraceful, embarrassing, pathetic eras in the modern history of the House of Representatives. For 8 weeks, Speaker Johnson let you all stay home while Americans missed paychecks, skipped meals, and watched their costs explode. Republicans quit their jobs. They disappeared. And they can argue all they want that the House did its job and that's why they went home. It's just BS. The House didn't do its job. If Republicans had done their job, we wouldn't be here right now voting on a different bill than the one that they passed. But instead of working with us on trying to end the shutdown, they all just left. They abandoned their offices, but more importantly, they abandoned the American people. And just so people know, while Republicans sat on their couches waiting for someone to tell them what to do, House Democrats were here. We were here working. We were meeting with regular people, talking with folks about next year's skyrocketing health insurance premiums. I've been back and forth to my district almost every weekend. People showed me the letters that they got on their premiums. They're doubling and they're tripling, not because of Democrats, but because Republicans are failing to act. They extended tax breaks for billionaires in like a nanosecond. That got done. They wasted no time helping out the well-off and the well-connected. But when it came time to help regular people, to extending the health care tax credits that 24 million people depend on, they didn't just say no, they shut the government down over it. Republicans skipped town for 8 weeks because Democrats had the gall to ask you to do something to help regular people. And you know what? It's a real shame. Republicans are selling out middle America, selling out working people, at a time when affordability is the #1 issue, and as we see record levels of inequality in this country, Republicans are selling out working people, all so they can do the bidding of the billionaire class. I mean, look what's happening. Trump's reckless tariffs continue to wreak havoc on the economy. He says food prices are way down. That's coming from a guy who dines on caviar at Mar-a-Lago. He's never shopped for groceries a day in his life. He doesn't have to pick between plastic or paper. But his tariffs are costing the average American household over $1,200 this year. And next year, it will be $1,600. That's money for groceries, for bills, for rent, taken out of the American people's wallets. And he's not even hiding it. He's rubbing it in. Trump is literally renovating his bathroom in marble and gold and posting about it on social media, while regular people are getting letters saying that their health care premiums are going up by $1,000. People are struggling to stay afloat, and this guy's golfing. He had Air Force One fly over a football game. How much did that cost? He shut down the airspace while regular travelers are stranded all over the country. The administration is funneling $40 billion to bail out Argentina. Republicans are literally subsidizing an entirely different country instead of keeping families in North Carolina or Minnesota or Texas or Indiana from going bankrupt if they face emergency hospital bills. And then giving your donors a fancy new ballroom at the White House while moms and dads can't afford to put food on the table. And speaking of putting food on the table, Trump illegally withheld food assistance from 42 million Americans, kids, veterans, seniors, working families. 2 federal court orders demanded that he pay out these benefits in full. But he would rather appeal to the highest court in the land to starve people out than to simply provide them with the food assistance that he is legally obligated to send to American families. Like, who does that? I mean, that's the Republican policy position. We'll give you your food if you let us take away your health care. I mean, who the hell thinks like that? And I know Republicans don't care. I know your donors have private doctors and insurance CEOs on speed dial. But could you at least pretend to do something about the 20 million Americans who are about to see their health care premiums soar? Or the 4 million people who could lose their coverage altogether? You don't even have a health care plan. You've been promising one for over a decade, and we've never seen it because it doesn't exist. Or maybe it's simply just hiding behind the missing appropriation bills that this Republican majority hasn't passed. I don't know. But what I do know is this. Republicans have been in charge for 292 days. That's 292 days to do something, anything, to lower costs, to bring down prices, to make America more affordable, to do something about health care, tariffs, grocery prices, rent, or heating bills. And what did you do? You handed out tax breaks to billionaires and took the longest paid vacation in modern history. Even your own colleagues called it out. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene says you guys messed up. When Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks you've gone too far, you might want to rethink things. And by the way, you also refused to even swear in our new colleague, the duly elected representative from Arizona's 7th District, Adelita Grijalva. Why? Because she will represent the 218th signature on a discharge petition to release the Epstein files. Oh, we didn't forget about those either. Don't worry. We won't forget that the Speaker of the House refused to swear in the first Latina ever elected to represent Arizona because he was more concerned about protecting pedophiles than getting the truth out there for the survivors. But that's just the perfect metaphor for the Trump economy. If you're rich and powerful, you get ahead. If you're a regular person, Republicans will not lift a finger to help you. And I want to be crystal clear. House Democrats represent something very different. We refuse to accept a government that moves at lightning speed to give tax breaks to billionaires, but then goes home for 8 weeks when it comes to ensuring health care is affordable for working families. We've said it from day one of this shutdown. We will sit down with any Republicans, anytime, any place, anywhere, in order to find a path forward that would reopen the government and finds a solution to Republicans' health care crisis. But we're not just going to roll over and accept your way.
And when they finally returned, they didn't walk back into the Capitol like leaders ready to fix a crisis. They walked in like tourists who had been away on vacation. That disappearance set off a chain reaction that millions of Americans are still dealing with today. Because while ordinary families cut meals, watched premiums skyrocket, and juggled rising grocery costs, lawmakers who were supposed to fight for them abandoned their posts. And when the speech began, calling out the truth behind those 8 missing weeks, something clicked. People realized this wasn't just about a shutdown. This was about what happens when leadership collapses, accountability disappears, and the people in charge choose comfort over responsibility. But the disappearance was only the first chapter. The real damage showed up in the mailboxes of everyday Americans. Letters arriving one after another, informing families that their health insurance premiums weren't just rising. They were doubling and even tripling. Parents panicked. Seniors panicked. Young people working 2 jobs panicked. Because when your premiums explode, it isn't just a number on a page. It's groceries, rent, emergency bills, and the difference between staying afloat and going under. And while that crisis mounted, the lawmakers responsible for preventing it retreated into silence, thousands of miles away, ignoring pleas from the very people who elected them. Meanwhile, Democrats stayed on the ground, meeting with families, hearing their stories, looking at their letters, facing the emotional weight of real people struggling under decisions they had no part in making. And every new conversation revealed the same thing. The crisis wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the direct result of refusing to extend healthcare tax credits that 24 million people depend on. Credits that help families avoid medical bankruptcy. Credits that keep sick children covered. Credits that keep hospitals from drowning under unpaid bills. Credits that could have been renewed in minutes, if even the slightest effort had been made. But while that didn't happen, one thing did. Tax breaks for billionaires. Passed in a nanosecond. Approved with lightning speed. pushed through like it was the most urgent priority in the entire country. And that contrast became impossible to ignore. Ordinary Americans waited, begged, worried, and suffered. Meanwhile, the wealthy and well-connected got relief faster than anyone could blink. Even some members of the party that disappeared were forced to admit things had gone too far. When your own colleagues start calling your behavior disgraceful, that's not politics. That's truth. And the economy? That's where things took an even sharper turn. Rising grocery costs. Tariffs that economists warned would hit working families the hardest. Households losing over $1,000 this year alone, and even more next year. Not hypotheticals, real numbers, hitting real wallets. And yet some leaders claimed that food prices were way down, as if they lived in a different world than the people standing in checkout lines doing basic calculations to see how many meals they could afford that week. Leaders who never had to pick between paper or plastic, who never had to choose between medicine and rent, who never lay awake wondering whether a single emergency bill would destroy their savings. Families struggled. Leaders renovated bathrooms with marble. People skipped meals. Leaders posted vacation photos. Americans were stranded in airports. Leaders shut down airspace so they could enjoy the view. It created a picture that didn't just look bad. It looked detached from reality, like the suffering of ordinary people wasn't even part of the conversation anymore. And then came the moment that made people stop in their tracks. The accusations that leaders illegally withheld food assistance from 42 million Americans. Veterans, seniors, children, people with disabilities, working families surviving paycheck to paycheck. 2 courts ordered the benefits to be paid. 2. And still the fight continued, with appeals dragging out the one thing people needed most: enough food to make it through the week. Rumors began circulating online that political motives were behind the delays. Speculation grew that appealing all the way to the highest court wasn't about policy. It was about making a point, even if that point left millions hungry. By then, people were asking the same question across social media, news outlets, and town halls. How did priorities get so twisted? Because while working families struggled to buy groceries, the government approved a $40 billion bailout to Argentina. While parents rationed food, lawmakers argued over whether people deserved the benefits at all. And while Americans begged for relief, the wealthy moved forward with new mansions, new perks, new luxuries, and new influence. But then something emerged that almost overshadowed everything else: the refusal to swear in the newly elected representative from Arizona's 7th District, a historic first Latina for that district, a woman chosen by her voters, approved by the election system, and ready to serve. And yet she was blocked. Why? Because her signature, number 218, would have triggered the release of the Epstein files. Suddenly, what seemed like a procedural delay turned into a political storm. Online speculation exploded. Commentators questioned what was being protected and who. Rumors swirled about powerful names, hidden files, and decades-old secrets that might finally come to light. And of all the reasons to refuse a sworn-in member of Congress, this one sent shockwaves. Because if the government moves quickly to help billionaires, but stalls when it comes to transparency about one of the most controversial cases in modern history, people notice. They start connecting dots. They start asking questions. And once those questions begin, it becomes very hard to silence them. But the shutdown crisis didn't end there. The bigger issue was that leadership had been in charge for 292 days, with no plan for healthcare, no plan for lowering costs, no plan for stabilizing premiums, no plan for helping families, and no plan for preventing the chaos Americans now faced. Promises were made for over a decade. Plans were teased, hinted at, suggested, and teased again. Yet nothing ever materialized. Meanwhile, medical bills continued to rise, premiums soared, and millions faced losing coverage altogether. And through all of this, the ones suffering weren't the wealthy. They weren't the donors. They weren't the well-connected. They were the workers, the parents, the sick, the elderly, the people who live paycheck to paycheck, who rely on stable insurance, who cannot afford surprise premiums that jump by hundreds or thousands of dollars overnight. And the idea that lawmakers could skip town for 2 months while those people suffered, then return and pretend nothing happened, looked like something out of a political thriller, not real life. But real life it was. And the consequences are still unfolding. In the end, the speech wrapped with a promise. not from political elites, but from those still fighting in the Capitol while others disappeared. A promise that Democrats would keep showing up, keep pushing, keep negotiating, keep fighting for working families. That they wouldn't walk away from a crisis simply because it was inconvenient or politically messy. Because leadership isn't about picking the easy fights. It's about staying in the room when everything gets hard. And as premiums continue to rise, as families brace for financial shocks, and as Americans wait for answers, one thing is certain. The people who vanished for 8 weeks are going to have to face the consequences of what happened during those missing days. Every premium spike, every lost healthcare plan, every family pushed to the brink. Their voters will ask questions. And sooner or later, they'll need real answers. If this breakdown helped you understand what's unfolding behind the scenes and why millions of Americans are feeling the impact, make sure you subscribe, drop a like, and hit the bell so you never miss the stories they hope you don't notice. Your support keeps everything going, and there's much more to uncover in the next video.